In version 1.3 of Minecraft, the Emerald Ore was added. Villagers were included with this update as well, which changed a drastic amount of Minecraft as we know today. Many of us will likely remember spending our days trying to get emeralds, books, even ender eyes in order to progress in our status in the world we played upon. In 1.14, the Village and Pillage update, the worlds of emeralds was drastically changed, as were villagers, new classes, job blocks, and plenty more. It opened up a new world for obtaining enchanted books, new items, even a new process for beating the game itself, but most importantly, obtaining unending wealth. On March 20th, the Realm server I was playing on at the time proposed a challenge from a man named Mr. Shock Gamer. The person with the most emeralds by April 4th would get a special role and a parade in their honor. Now, obviously, as any self-centered person would, I wanted to get that role and parade myself and have a permanent status among the server of my wealth. And so, I instantly got to work. It was a tough trial and a long challenge that would take much planning, experimenting, and guessing as to if something would work well or if I would be the equivalent to the Nintendo Wii U. But above all else, I needed the will to do this. I needed the will to farm emeralds and constantly work day after day in order to succeed, which luckily I had. I am LucaTheJackal, and this is my story of the Emerald War, how I managed to farm infinite amounts of emeralds just off of villagers alone, and how I managed to blow the competition out of the water entirely. This serves as a historical video for my friends on the server and advice to anyone else if they wish to become unbelievably wealthy all the same. But without further ado, let me show you how I beat my friends in a Minecraft Emerald War. March 20th through March 22nd. The competition started very abruptly. Mr. Shock Gamer proposed mostly out of the blue his competition, and a deadline which seemed a good while away, 2 full weeks in fact. Now at this point I wasn't necessarily the Emerald Man himself. I had a village, 2 of them in fact, which I had used, but I was often asking others for emeralds when I needed them, mostly for beacons. By all means, I'm technically in debt right now, but we're not going to tell Shock about this. Although I knew a simple technique, which I will elaborate on shortly, I had only about 2 stacks or less of blocks at the time. Quite a lot, but it certainly wasn't enough, especially after the screenshot was shared from another person on the server known as David. Obviously, I was a bit nervous, and especially after I just showed the technique, which I used to Shock Gamer himself, who was certainly in a position to have 2 villages with his new base nearly complete. Things were looking like they would go south if I didn't put some time and effort in now. And so, I began. Like I said, I had 2 villager areas, one at my old base and one at my new one. My old one wasn't very impressive and wasn't incredibly helpful in the long run. So we will mostly be focusing on my new village I dubbed Villager Island. And while you may want to mock me in the comments, I just want to put fresh in everyone's mind that this entire competition was called the Emerald War, which was inspired by Technoblade's Potato War. In any case, during this 3-day period I had 3 Librarians, 4 Farmers, 2 Clerics, and 2 Stonemasons. Let's elaborate on each. Villager number 1. Librarians. Librarians are one of the most popular villagers out there for one reason, that being enchanted books. These guys give you enchanted books, some of which are unobtainable from the enchanting table itself, for a small to costly fee. In fact, you can even manipulate them in 1.14 onwards to give you the enchanted book that you want. However, spending money on books was the last thing we wanted, so we focused on the traits they offered. They offer 24 paper, 4 books, 5 ink sacks, or 1 written book for 1 emerald. Each of these trades are very good, paper is easy to get, and books are as well. Ink sacks could be a bit of a pain as well, but there was never any reason to go grind for them. But the most crucial part of this entire operation was the concept of curing zombie villagers. Zombie villagers are a type of villager which naturally spawns in. By tossing a splash potion of weakness and giving them a golden apple, you could cure them and change them to normal villagers. At this point, I have only shown the normal prices that were offered from the villagers. I obtained all of my villagers by curing them from zombie villagers, which give a hefty discount. I couldn't find exactly the proper discount they gave, but it varied around 20 to 30%, for at least the first trade listed, which was paper in this case. The paper trade lowered to about 18 paper for most, if not a little different around that area. However, the most important part were the books, which were lowered to 1 book per emerald each. These became crucial for a constant supply because bookshelves were sold. Bookshelves were a block each, which, upon breaking without Silk Touch, gives 3 books. Although Librarians sold bookshelves for 9 emeralds each, and even with the initial Zombie Villager discount, they became 3 emeralds for 1 bookshelf, and respectively 3 books. However, upon trading with more villagers inside villages, or by curing more zombie villagers, discounts will become greater, and you can sell and buy stuff with a higher profit, which becomes very useful later, but we won't go into the specifics just yet. What matters is that Librarians sold bookshelves for 1 emerald at this point, which means I could get 3 books for 1 emerald. This gives me a constant boost in emeralds, a constant supply of a valuable resource in a villager, which was almost everywhere due to its trait of having enchanted books. Early on, in fact, I used my first village to trade my books when I managed to have a vast excess of it. It doesn't give a massive amount of emeralds, as I was spending 24 emeralds each day to get 24 bookshelves, but I was gaining 36 emeralds per day due to books itself, evening out to an easy 12 emeralds per day, which would add up in the long run, especially if I took a break from getting the bookshelves. Side note, every time I mention per day in this video, I will be referring to every Minecraft day, not every real day. Villagers work on a daily cycle in Minecraft, working and refreshing their trades during the day, and sleeping in the night. In summary, Librarians became very useful with a constant supply of books, which I could gain and sell at the same time. Villager number 2, Farmers. Farmers are another incredibly common villager, as they are often one of the easiest to obtain resources for, especially mid-game, once you have the proper farms set up. Now, I had 4 farmers at the time, 1 for each of the 4 farmable items: wheat, beetroots, carrots, and potatoes, which sold for 20, 15, 22, and 22 emeralds respectively. While these were very useful and often produced a good amount of emeralds, these were not the main thing that they were used for. Along with one of the 4 items, any and all farmers will sell 6 pumpkins for 1 emerald and 4 melons for 1 emerald. While that doesn't sound efficient at all, and it's really not, when you include the zombie villager discount, they will offer you 1 emerald for 1 pumpkin and melon block, which, in return, can give you a maximum of 24 emeralds per every farmer every day. And I had 4, which could get me around 96 emeralds every day, already giving me 10 blocks each, which, incredible amount of emeralds, not even considering the extra I gained from their initial trade. An extremely profitable villager, especially if you have a powerful farm. Villager number 3, Clerics. Clerics are an odd case. While they are almost essential to 1.14 speedruns and for completing the game if one doesn't want to spend forever trading with piglins further on, they don't provide many options for profit overall. I had 2 of them at the time, and only one of them had one of the better traits in the game, which was glass bottles. Glass bottles sold for 9 per emerald at base, which could be lowered to 3 per emerald with 1 curing, and, as said before with Librarians, the trade would get lowered even further due to the effect of being a good person. On the note of Librarians, they in fact sell glass, which I was able to use for obtaining a good amount of glass bottles, and then every 4th day I'd refresh such when the bottle supply ran out. So, I had a 1 bottle per emerald trade for 1 villager. It wasn't the best, but it was a very helpful side option to have for a little bonus. My only other options were to sell rotten flesh, which was unbelievably expensive. Even after curing them, they would sell flesh for around 18, 19, or even 20 per emerald, and I certainly wasn't going to spend hours grinding for flesh when I could just focus on becoming part of the simple middle class and farming pumpkins and melons. My other option was Netherwort, which was somewhat helpful, and I'd regularly get emeralds from it. Although at a base level they would sell the wort for 22 per emerald, I managed to have mine lower to between 8 and 11 for both of the clerics. Overall, a good villager if you want side money on occasion, but I would never focus directly on it personally. Villager number 4, Stonemasons. Stonemasons are an interesting situation. While they never provide any good long-term investments, now that you can sell to them as renewable, They are incredibly valuable for a short time burst in money, which I would come back to several times. They sell 4 notable traits: clay, quartz, stone, and one of the ice ores. Although I never used the latter 2 for this war, they were very valuable in the past for me, especially with the zombie village discount. I'd always recommend having 1 or 2 around just for an extra burst of money if you ever have an excess amount of stone or an ice ore. At the very start of this war, I flew around my base a bit and collected some clay with my fortune shovel. Although it didn't last very long, it provided me a good amount of emeralds, with one of the masons selling it for 1 emerald per piece of clay, giving me around 16 emeralds per day. I will mention shortly that most villagers buy items in quantities of either 12 or 16. Every first trade, such as paper for librarians, flesh for clerics, and clay for masons, will be 16, and every other one, with few exceptions, will be around 12. After you hit that number, the trade becomes locked until they refresh their traits. At this point, these were the 4 types of villagers I had. I spent the 3 days gathering resources, mining bookshelves, and trading for emeralds. During these 3 days, I had a neutral profit of around 120 emeralds per day, or about 13 blocks. When I say neutral profit, I don't mean every day I gained exactly 120 emeralds. There are many variables which could change such. Sometimes villagers would raise their prices for items and I would have to wait until they refreshed the following day for them to do so. But in return, some days I would have extra resources, such as potatoes and carrots, which I could sell for extra profit. When I say neutral profit, I mean what I could get on average with the resources I almost always had on me, such as pumpkins, glass bottles, and books. This profit was determined by how librarians give me around 12 emeralds per day, clerics would give me around 12 as well, and how my 4 farmers would give me 24 emeralds each for pumpkins and melons, equaling 96 emeralds for the farmers alone. March 23rd. At this point, the general strategy was set. Focus on repeating buying and selling with librarians, sell general farming foods to farmers, and whatever else I could shove in between, I would do so with the clerics and stonemasons. But obviously, that wouldn't work perfectly by that point. Gaining only 13 blocks per day was barely anything. Most standard survival farms would most likely be able to reach as much, if not more than that. And of course, with a place like Shock where he had several librarians, many more than I did, I knew I was going to be in a bit of danger if I did not start to increase my yield. So I was forced to broaden my horizon and find new ways to make profit, which eventually brought me to 2 new villagers: Fletchers and Cartographers. Villager number 5, Fletchers. Fletchers are one of the most iconic villagers as of 1.14. Librarians or clerics are extremely notable due to how they were already greatly used back in the day, and their applicability with improving your gear or beating the game. However, in short-term completions, speedrunning included, Fletchers are some of the most prominent villagers due to their initial trade, sticks. A Fletcher's first trade is 32 sticks for 1 emerald, which can be lowered to 25 instantly with the zombie villager effect. Already a very good trade, considering getting sticks on paper sounds incredibly easy to do, which it was. The simple issue was getting a vast amount of them. The simple solution as such was making a small tree farm. One of my favorite types of trees in late game are those 2x2 spruce trees. They go up a good while and you can gain around a stack of logs, if not a good bit more, which each of those trees grown. All I had to do is regularly chop those down, which wasn't a hard task at this point. And throughout the course of that day, I realized Fletchers were a very good investment. Not only could you trade vast amount of sticks very easily, the stick trade was the first trade a Fletcher has. Now this raises a quick question: what does that have to do with anything? Well, aside from a simple answer of, well, that means you could trade that trade right away and not have to waste any other resources, there's also the factor of how you can get 16 emeralds instead of 12 per day. As mentioned earlier, some trades either lock around 16 or 12 emeralds per day. Fletchers, however, with 6 being the first trade they have, means they lock at 16. So instead of gaining 12 emeralds per day off of sticks, I could gain 16 per day. And this adds up. Over the course of that day, I got 4 total Fletchers, allowing a yield of 64 emeralds per day. Already, just like a Dreams Manhunt video, this was insane. But don't expect this to be the end of our Fletcher friends, because it is far, from such. Villager number 6, Cartographers. After finishing gaining a few Fletchers, I was considering what else to get. Not many other options appealed, at least on paper. My choices involved either villagers, which trade for items such as coal or iron, which was an incredibly temporary source of income which would just drain supplies that I could use later on, or other things such as wool, which, let's be honest, that just doesn't sound like an efficient way to spend my time. And upon scrolling through the Minecraft wiki, I found Cartographers. Cartographers are notable simply for the fact that you can trade for maps to woodland mansions and ocean monuments, which wasn't a bad trade at all. However, on paper, none of their trades were really notable except for one. The only 3 possible trades they had were paper, which Librarians already had, and compasses, which, as stated before, used valuable resources and was incredibly temporary. However, the main trade we looked at was glass panes. At base, 11 per emerald, which was already very good. Librarians would give me 4 glass for 1 emerald, and 8 glass would make 16 panes. Although I don't think my math added up at the time, it sounded like a very profitable deal in the long run, if not a bit slow. Of course, this is excluding the zombie villager discount, which ranged around 5 glass panes for 1 emerald. A very good profit all the same, and due to the general villager discounts I had at the time, with how I had cured so many zombie villagers by this point, the prices ended up ranging around 4 to 5 to 6. The only issue was obtaining this glass in the first place. Getting a constant supply of glass from Librarians just invalidated the profit I would make from them. Clearly not worth it. So my other option was to dig up a desert. Although I didn't dig up the entire desert, I got 2 shulker boxes of sand, shoved them in a mini super smelter, and very shortly I gained a good amount of glass panes. All in all, very efficient day, gaining several new villagers, tons of supplies, and I even made a second pumpkin and melon farm to help with a constant supply of those items. And by the end of that day, I'd increased my average yield of daily emeralds to around 24 blocks per day, almost double my previous yield of 13. Clearly I was going on the right track, and let me tell you, this track was about to drive higher than Technoblade's kill-death ratio. March 24th. March 24th was an uneventful day for the most part. This day was simultaneously the least interesting day out of all of them, but also one of the most interesting all the same. Throughout most of this day, I mostly did work on gaining emeralds, trading regularly with the villagers I had. Over the course of the day, however, I managed to gain 2 librarians and 2 more cartographers, which gave me an extra boost in emeralds. Along with such, I expanded my new pumpkin and melon farm for more efficiency and the ability to trade many more pumpkins and melons with the villagers. However, the most essential part of the day came at the very end when I was acquiring a new 5th Fletcher. I knew how zombie villagers worked, and that by curing them I gained a hefty discount in trading. However, there was one question I asked myself and shortly experimented with. Didn't this effect stack? Of course. I had to test it. Taking the newly cured villager, I made a new pit around my farms, stuck him inside, and lured some zombies over, infecting him again. And upon killing the zombie and re-curing the villager, I had the ultimate revelation. This does stack. This was insane for several reasons. One, it was clear that I could stack the effect and lower trades to whatever I wanted, be it I had enough golden apples and weakness potions. Plus, along with such, every time I cured a zombie villager near the area, all the other villagers would get a slight discount, which is why over time prices on items went down. As a direct example, let's talk about cartographers. During March 23rd, they had a price range around 4 to 5 to 6 glass panes per emerald, but by the start of the 24th, they would range around 1 to 2 to 3 glass panes per emerald, which is already a vast improvement, and would greatly increase my profit. By the end of that very same day, all would range around 1 glass pane per emerald, if not a little bit higher in the upcoming days. Of course, the main question here was, how high could I take this? If I could get a Fletcher to give me 1 stick for 1 emerald, 16 sticks for 16 emeralds in a day, how far could I go with this? However, there was a problem. Earlier that morning, I had shared a screenshot to the Discord as a little confident boost and just to see how everyone would react. At the end of the day, however, smugly, Shock retorted with this as a screenshot. I had a shulker box by this point. A full shulker box of emeralds, and although I was ahead, this was concerning. How was he gaining this much? It was hard to tell how, but it was clear that I would need to use a strategy to defeat him. March 25th. The day where everything started to change. Although I had a disappointment at the start of the day, I knew that there would be plenty of work to be done. See, the issue with getting several recurring villagers is that I needed vast amounts of gold, which wasn't the easiest thing to obtain. I had 5 direct options, some of which I ruled out very quickly. My options were, go strip mining in the overworld, strip mine in the nether, make a gold farm, go search for golden apples for all in dungeons and such, or mooch off of a friend. Now, making a gold farm sounded like a massive waste of time. I wasn't sure how efficient it would be, and let alone every design required about 7 million magma blocks, which I sure as hell wasn't going to mine, especially for a farm in the nether. And of course, looking for golden apples in dungeons and mine shafts was incredibly inefficient. There was no real way to look for them, and even so, if I could, there was no guarantee I would find golden apples in the first place. So I was left with 3 options with pros and cons for each. Mining in the overworld was slightly unreliable, but it was potentially possible I could keep my villagers and farms running all the same. Next up was mining in the nether, which felt more reliable to obtain gold, but I wouldn't have any chance of change in the real world, plus the direct danger of being in the nether. And finally, mooch off a friend. Now at this point in the server there were 3 really rich people. Firstly, myself, and obviously I can't get gold for myself, excluding manual labor, which, imagine working for straight hours to get a bunch of a singular ore. Couldn't be me. The second option was Shock himself, which was an even worse option. Not only would it tip him off that I'm needing excess amounts of gold for my project, which could have him catch up to me, and that's the last thing I want. And of course, the more important factor, it just make me look kind of pathetic, and that's the last thing I want to look like. So my last option was a man named David. This man was incredibly rich in multiple factors. He had some of the best buildings in the server, an entire nation basically, and several auto farms, and certainly a good profit of material wealth. You'll probably remember him earlier because I shared that screenshot of him with quite a few emeralds. And so, I paid a visit and asked if I could have some. They said they spent most of their gold in the new piglin farm they made, but surely they'd have a little extra, right? You're kidding me. This man had 50 blocks of diamonds, 2 blocks of netherite, over a row of shulker boxes, 3 dragon heads, but 2 gold ingots? Obviously there was a slight flaw in my plan. This meant that I had to start a process to gain gold, manually, and fast. My first thought was to start strip mining in the nether. This would certainly work well, right? It didn't. I found 2 patches of gold, which one of them was already showing up from a previous netherite mining in the area. Clearly it wasn't working out as much as I'd hoped. But then I remembered. Badlands. Normally, during roll generation, gold ore attempts to spawn 2 times per chunk from levels 0 to 32. This wasn't a very lucky method, and there clearly wasn't going to be enough to gain from this. However, in Badland biomes, gold ore attempts to spawn 20 times per chunk from layers 32 to 79. Not only was there a larger range to find it, and an easier range as well, it was 10 times more likely to be found. The only issue was finding a Badlands biome, which luckily we had already found one at this point around 5,000 blocks away. While I could have simply flown over, I thought it would be worth my time to mine in the nether and travel there, which surely would have been shorter to travel, and I would have made a good amount of profit by that time. And I did! A stack plus of gold, tons of quartz and gravels as well, which would be very helpful for side money later on. I'm going to be honest, I was genuinely livid with how much ancient debris I found during this trip. I never found this much while deliberately mining for it, with beds as well. Infuriating. But I thought about how infuriated my opponents would be during the end of this war, and I continued onwards, flying to the nearby Badlands, and almost right away after popping into a cave, I found plenty. I even got lucky and found a couple golden apples while roaming dungeons. Things were looking up. At this point, I returned home, started smelting everything in a super smelter, mined quartz, got flint, and continued to sell items while lowering the prices for Fletchers and such along the way. Some from the zombie villager effect, and some from just general trading. I even got my glass-selling Cleric down to 1 netherwort for an emerald, so that was a new constant supply to have. By the end of this day, with 4 new Fletchers to play, all having 1 stick for 1 emerald, I was ranging around an average yield of 38 blocks per day on average. I was still able to make even more profit at the time due to the flint and quartz I was constantly selling as well. March 26th. So at this point, the question to ask was, where do we go from here? There wasn't much else to improve, at least it didn't seem. Throughout the day, I mostly spent getting new Fletchers with what gold I had left, and eventually getting me to have 12 Fletchers, all of which sold 1 stick for 1 emerald. Already insane. And then I had the revelation. Flint. I was already selling a vast amount of flint per day, what's to stop me from selling more? I had a gravel ocean a bit east of my base, but was stopping me from mining up a ton of flint then and there. And so I did. I spent a good amount of that time digging up the ocean and getting 2 shulker boxes of flint. Luckily I had a fortune shovel, so I was able to easily mine the ocean, collect flint, and eventually head home later in the day. And so, along with everything else I was trading, I had gained 4 Fletchers, and I was now trading 1 flint for 1 emerald with each of my now 12 Fletchers. With this, I was able to obtain an average daily yield of 61 blocks per day. 61! And again, a reminder, this was on average. Some days I had extra potatoes, carrots, quartz, string, or any other item which would boost my amount, so I would be obtaining a stack of emerald per day, if not more. At the end of this day, I had obtained my 2nd shulker box, only in the matter of a single day. March 27th. At this point, there was really no direct room to improve in. I spent this day doing general work, I gained a new farmer for an extra supply of pumpkins and melons, and I simply organized my villager area so my Fletchers could be properly organized. But big numbers go burr, so let's just give you the stats right now. At the end of this day, I was able to obtain 64 emerald blocks per day, and I had 2 shulker boxes and 13 stacks of blocks by that very point. All in all, a very good position. March 28th. March 28th, a very, very critical day. All things considered, the start of this day was rather normal. I spent a vast majority of it farming, polishing the base, and improving my 2nd melon and pumpkin farm to ensure I gained over 64 blocks of emeralds per day. By the end of that day, I had obtained my 3rd shulker box. I was about to log off by that point, but Shock had decided to come on, so I thought I'd hang out, chat a bit, and gather some more resources for the upcoming week. I needed bookshelves, so I sought out a stronghold, and I also needed some more flint, so I started to gather a supply of those yet again from the same ocean. And so, while I continued to gather my resources, we had a conversation. At this point, my only concern was how much Shock was making. He sounded incredibly confident. With the screenshot posted a few days ago, I was quite concerned. How much could he be making, and what method was he doing it with? Was my method even worth it in the long run if he was keeping even with me? So I had to ask, how much did he have? He wasn't going to give it up easily, but I had to figure it out somehow. But eventually, we reached a deal. In return for giving him my daily average yield of emeralds, he would give me his exact count at that point. And so I told him. Around that point, I was gaining around 64 to 70 blocks per day, which is what I told him. And then he spoke this to me. I have 23 stacks! 23 stacks. At this point in time, after almost a week of time to gather emeralds, he had only 23 stacks. The best part of this whole conversation was instigated when I was informed that he was given 10 stacks by David himself, which I was rightfully upset about, but it was clear that this was meaningless in the entire run. During his smug chatter, confidently telling me he was certainly very far ahead of me, I simply sat, smiling, waiting for my moment. Shock. I have 3 shulker boxes full of emerald blocks. And judging by the silence that was held afterwards, I'd like to believe a little shock was felt. Although that last sentence most likely ruined my YouTube career, it was extremely clear that this Emerald War was going vastly in my favor. Not only did I have more than thrice the amount of emeralds he had, I was gaining around a stack of blocks every single Minecraft day, and I had yet to even perfect my strategy. There was a vast amount of improvement to be made, quantity or quality related. But all I really had to do at this point was continue. All it was left to do was continue my method, sell sticks, gain emeralds, and improve slightly along the way. All I had to do was stay strong for the next week that followed until April 4th, when the competition would end. I did it? I won! The only competitor I had at the time had officially dropped out of the competition, and I was decided by basically the entire community that I had won. I gained my role, dubbed Emerald Leader, and wore it with pride and just a tiny bit of gloating. But of course, how could I forget? The parade! The best part of this all was that I was going to get a parade in my honor. This would be amazing. The parade was held on the 4th. 3 other people were on, not including myself. I brought 2 llamas through the nether, 2 of which were killed. One almost instantly by shock, and the other was shot by David when he was aiming for another mob. We didn't even march anywhere, and the only person who actually used fireworks for myself. I spent fireworks on my own parade! This sucks! But, by the end of the day, what mattered was the bragging rights I had. I had completely obliterated the competition with my emerald supply, and the utter disbelief they had of the amount I had obtained over the week of working. I forever had these bragging rights, and no one would ever be able to contest me again in a competition like this. Side note, remember that screenshot I shared earlier of Shock's emerald supply? This one? Yeah, that was a literal lie. He later on told me that he went into a copy of the world, gave himself tons of emeralds in creative mode, and put it all in a shulker box to make himself look good. To which I say was his greatest mistake, motivating me even further to destroy any and all competition. At the end, the man himself supposedly had 7,776 emeralds. But of course, the question everyone is asking, how many emeralds exactly did I have at that time? At the end of the competition, I had 3 shulker boxes along with 28 extra blocks. 3 shulker boxes made 81 stacks, which equaled 5,184 blocks, and adding the extra 21 I had, a total of 5,212 blocks. Multiply that by 9, and I had a grand total of 46,908 emeralds. I won by a slight margin. To the strangers on the internet who happened to stumble upon this video, I must thank you for watching this video. I put a ton of effort into it, and although it's my first video on this channel, I do really hope you enjoyed it. And as you would all know, it would mean a lot if you were to like and subscribe. I would be happy to make another video similar to this if I was given a chance. Heck, if you like this video and have recommendations on other challenges I can try or overwhelm the competition with, let me know. And to my friends on the server, Shock especially, I give you this one message. Never test my resolve! Get owned, losers!